Welcome back to part 2 of colorizing a black and white image using Photopea, using new layers and setting them to color mode. In this video, we'll be finishing up with the skin tones, the eyes, the lips, and the hair. And what I'm going to do now is just do her skin, which I'll just do kind of a peachy pinkish, I guess. Looking at the pictures of her, looks like it would kind of work, something like that. So I'll go back and zoom into her face a little bit more. So her face is taking up most of the screen. And I'll make my brush a little softer, so I'm going to go over here, make my brush not that much, not 100%, but maybe like around 80 or something like that. So it's a little softer around the edges. Even 75 should be fine. So that just makes the edge of the brush softer. Still using a round brush. If you're not sure how to get out of here, just click up here. That gets you out of there. Sometimes you don't know where to click on here, because if you click, it'll start using the brush, and we don't want to yet. So just click up here when you do anything with the brush. And we're going to make a layer. Don't forget, we want to make a layer here. So whatever layer you were on last, make a new one above it. So after BG, I'm going to do one for skin. I'm just going to click on that little dog-eared page, and I'll call this skin. And I'll make my brush nice and big, because you can see there's lots of big areas to work on here. And I'll go and find a nice kind of beigey color. I'll start with red, and then maybe I'll move it up into kind of the orangey red. Something like that. And then I'll just kind of pick a kind of color over here. And I'll see how it looks. I'm not sure, but I'll just kind of start painting. And remember, when you start painting like this, it looks like some kind of Warhol kind of thing. It's just flat color. And remember, you need to go over here and change the normal mode to color. And that's not too bad. Remember, you can turn down the opacity. So if it's just an opacity thing, you can go here and turn it down. And I guess that looks okay. If you want a little more pinkish, you could do this. You could just take your eraser. If you're like, I don't like this color, take your eraser, make it real big, and just erase what you did. And then go back to your brush and double click here and say, well, I want it a little more kind of pinkish, on the pinkish side. So I'm going to go down more into the red on this kind of scale here. So I'll go a little more in the red, and I'll see how that looks. And I'll hit OK, and now I'll start painting again. Now it is on the color mode, so it's kind of intense, but remember, you could go here and turn this down. So you could turn that down a little bit. So that'll help a little bit. And I'm going to go right through her eyebrows. I don't think I'm going to color her eyebrows, although you could. And I'll move up here, kind of try to get around her forehead line here a little bit, or cheeks. I'll just go right over her nose. I'm not going to do anything special with her nose. I'm going to kind of stay away from her eyes a little bit, because we may want to accent her eyes a little bit. I'll go into her ears, up into her eyes up here. I got a little on there. I'll clean it up, and that's not a bad color. And you could just click too. You don't always have to be painting if you find it easier to just click as you go around here. And again, you could go in with a smaller brush. So you could just kind of click as you go. I'll click kind of on her ear here. And I'll stay away from kind of like under her eyes, because I might colorize that a different color a little bit. And I'll make my brush smaller. And I'll zoom in just a little bit as I go around her eyes. And kind of finish over here around her eyebrows. I'll do her eyebrows kind of brown as the skin that I'm doing. I'll go into her eyes just a little bit here, a little bit into the shadows. But I'll leave the kind of the eyelids, and under her eyes I might change that color a little bit. But I'll make my brush small, kind of finish this off over here, kind of go around here, and that should be okay. Let me go down, see what I have down here. I'll make my brush a little bigger. And remember, you can click once and hold shift and kind of make a straight line if you need to, if that helps. And I'm going over her lips a little bit, but that should be okay. I don't think that should be a problem. And I'll just go down here. Again, I'm a little sloppy here. The second time I just did it, I practiced it once just to make sure I didn't find anything that would confuse anybody, so, or it wouldn't be too hard. And it isn't too hard, so this should be fine. So that's not bad for her skin. We're going to go in here and kind of, I'll go over her eyebrows a little bit. And I think I got everything with her skin. Let me see on this side here. That's kind of her hair in there, so that's okay. Let me zoom out just to make sure All right, I got everything. So we're going to change this just a little bit in here. Now, you could work on the same layer, but I'm going to make a layer called eye makeup. So let me zoom in here and just change the color slightly so we can just edit this color. So I'll make a new layer. And one thing's nice too, it saves the colors. It keeps your most recent colors. So if you do have to go back and change something, which sometimes can be a problem. And before I do anything else, let me erase, put a little in here, a little extra on here, and I'll go back to my paint brush. Now above skin, I'll make a new layer, and I'll double click on the name, and I'll call it eye makeup. And I'll double click here, and maybe I'll just kind of move this up here and more of the pink area. I'll keep it maybe a little lighter. I don't want it a whole lot different. I just want a little bit of pinkish up there, and I'll see how this looks. And I'll go down on the brush size. Now right away, I'll go here and make it color, and I'll go in here. Now that's really intense. Now that's okay, and I'll go into her crevices a little bit. Like I said, it's a little intense. I think I went over some of the pinkish stuff in there. Now that looks really intense. But that's okay, because we're going to turn this down. So we can go to opacity, turn that down a little bit, and that doesn't look quite as intense. And then maybe we could even double click the color here and maybe go a little more into the violet ranges. Go a little more in the violets here. Or I guess getting closer to bluer. I'll just see how that looks. I'll make my brush smaller. And just kind of go over her eyes a little bit. Go into the crevices. Over here, I'm not really a makeup guy, but I don't know if you'd have purple down there, or that would more be her skin color. That would be down there. And again, better at that than me. You could work on that a little bit more, but getting a little sloppy in here. I think that'll still look nice with that in there. And you could go back. Here's the skin color. I think that one there. You could go back and make the brush smaller. And maybe if you need to go in there with a little more skin color, you could. If it's a little too much, if I went a little overboard with all the kind of purple stuff, I could go back in with the skin color and kind of paint over that and go through there. That doesn't look too bad. I'm not a makeup artist, like I said. That doesn't look too bad. Looks like the color might be a little darker, and you could even mix up some stuff in here. Maybe throw a little on her brows, just a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good for a guy who's not a makeup artist. And I'll zoom out, and maybe a little intense, but like I said, you could always just turn down this just a little bit. And you could try something else. You could try a different color. You could try like I said, a layer style with a color overlay. But I'll leave that like it is now. And I'll do her lips, which should be fairly easy. I'll zoom in here real tight to get her lips. Scroll down. And again, change this from normal to color. And I'll go find kind of a reddish color. I'll go up here. And it'll probably look very intense when I first do it. I'll make my brush bigger. And that looks really intense. It's okay. And you can see, well, let me undo. You can undo, but I'm going to try to leave her teeth alone. You could go over her teeth, or you could erase stuff. I did undo, Command Z or Control Z. And you can see what this colorization does. It lets the highlights and the dark show through. And it colorizes kind of all the midtones. And look at that, very, very luscious work I'm doing here on the lips. And that doesn't look too bad. If I zoom out, it won't look too bad. I didn't get around the edges really good. I could go back with the skin a little bit if I wanted to. But if this looks a little too intense, remember, opacity, just turn it down. Opacity is your friend. Turning down the opacity makes the lips look a little more natural. So that looks pretty good. Click on this. I'll do Command minus. And doesn't look too bad. And the last thing I'll do is her hair. So let's just make a new layer here. I'll call it hair. And obviously I'll do kind of a yellowish kind of thing for her hair. Remember, change normal down to color. You could do that at any time. If you forgot to do it, it's not a big deal. And I'll go here and find kind of a yellowish color, and I don't want a real intense yellow color. And I'm a little more on the platinum side, so something like that. I'll make my brush, go on my paintbrush, make it nice and big. Use my right bracket and zoom in just a little bit so I could kind of go around and just see what it looks like here. Now that looks very yellowish. Now I'm not doing right on the edges over here because I might go and do that with kind of more of a semi-transparent. And actually one thing you could do is make sure you make this nice and soft so the edges will be a little more transparent around the edges, so it'll be a little more blurry around the edges. And when you do this, again, just click over here to get rid of that. And I'll make my brush a little bit bigger so it's a little softer on the edges. And if it looks too yellow, we can turn down the opacity. That's what we've been doing, and that's been working okay. And I'm just doing this real quick. Looks very kind of 60s pop art right now with the really bright colors. Andy Warhol looking kind of thing here. But we'll tone it down so it looks a little more natural. And if you think about when they used to colorize movies, they would be doing each frame of the movie. So if there were 30 frames per second, they would be coloring all those frames. So that's why colorized movies took a long time to develop and still didn't always have really good results. I'm sure there's better technology to do that now. Now this looks, like I said, very yellowish and Warhol looking right now to start. And then I might even do this. I might even put my opacity down on the paintbrush, not on the layer, but on the paintbrush. Take it down to like 50% or something, or even lower. And then just go around the edge a little bit so I overlay the background, but it's just kind of soft. So I'm not going to go over every hair, but I'm just going to kind of give like a soft edge to it so it picks up some of that like frizzy look along the edge. And that's not too bad. And again, it's very intense. So I'll turn down the opacity. And it looks better when I turn it down, and that looks pretty good. And like I said, you could change the effects if you like that background. You think that looks better, you could use that. I like the blue background a little bit, but that looks pretty good. If you wanted to change the shirt or anything, her hair, her lips, whatever, like I said, you could change the blouse. You could just go on that layer, or go on the blouse layer. Let's say you wanted to give her a green blouse. Go to Layer, Layer Style. Make sure you're on the blouse layer. Layer Style. And this would be the same way in Photoshop. Color Overlay, and it's doing a brown color, which actually doesn't look bad, looks kind of natural. And I'll go here, and it's still using this blend color mode, so that's okay because you're going to want it to be that way anyway. But maybe I'll go and see if I could find a green color, and actually I could kind of see it right now, and that doesn't look bad actually. I kind of like the green, so I'll hit OK, and I'll hit OK again, and you could adjust the opacity here. You can adjust the opacity here on the blouse layer. Now to see that effect, you got to go to the little arrow here, and there it is. Now if you go on the effect itself, I think you could turn down the effect so I don't know if it'll show the purple through it. I guess it won't. It'll just go back. So you could turn down the green a little bit. If the green looks too intense, it's like that. If you don't like the green, you go back to the purple. So there's with a purple blouse, there's with a green blouse. So we're doing some colorization. So that's about it. That's all you have to do for this. Now I'm going to do save and save my PSD. If you ever wanted to share this with me, they have an option where you can do publish online, and you could publish the PSD online, and then you can get a URL, and you could send me that URL there and put that in there. So that's one way to do it, and I'll show you all the different ways. So I'll do that. I'll go here. Will be published under a public URL, and then you just have to copy the URL. So I'll try that. That should open up in a new tab, I believe, when you do that. See, there's my previous tab. It's opening up in a new tab. So what you could do, you could send me your PSD file. You could copy this URL. The other way is I'm going to go here and close this because I don't really need that. And you can go to File, Export As. You can export as a JPEG because a photograph you want to save as a JPEG, that would flatten all these layers. So you would just see one image. So I'm going to export as JPEG. And there it is, JPEG. It uses the same name as the Photoshop file, except it'll put .jpeg at the end. And you can even make it smaller if you want. So if it's
956 or something. It's the same name as the Photoshop file, except we'll put .jpeg at the end. 400. You could even make it smaller if you want. It'll lock its proportion together. 956 or something. You could leave the quality as smaller when you it'll make it a little bit smaller. 400 or something. You could just hit save. It'll lock its proportion together, and you could leave the quality. It downloaded now. It's in my downloads.
So you have your JPEG, you have your PSD, and we're all done. Thanks for watching Home Studio.